Why don't we start off with just quick introductions of our panel. We'll start with Tara.
Hi, my name is Tara Corcoran. I have a son here in the 7th grade, and it's actually his first year. We school choice this year in from, well, we school choice to Hopedale, now we're school choicing here from Uxbridge.
Hi, I'm Sue Chase. I have a son who's a senior this year and another son who's a freshman this year, and then I have my daughter Carrie who's in 7th grade here at the middle school. So I've been here for many years. I'm also the president of the PTO here at the middle school, and myself and my kids have been very involved over the years.
Tammy Austin. I have 3 students who are at the high school now. One's in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. So we were all at one point, all here at the middle school for 1 year together. We've always been very involved. I helped out with the PTO. I think I had a unique experience having them all here at the same time at the middle school with a variety of backgrounds that I hope might be able to help some of you as you with different children and different options, and as we share tonight. So I'll leave it at that.
Joanne Watson, I know most of you anyway. I have a freshman currently and a daughter who's coming up into the 5th grade. 2 different kids, 2 different personalities. So hopefully, same thing, I can share a little bit of insight on my son's experience when he came through here and find out some new stuff as well.
And I'm Lene Jackson. I have just one child who is a current 6th grader, so we've got our first foot in the door to this whole middle school experience.
Great. Any questions about our format before we begin? Great. So I'm going to ask the first question, and again, as many of you that may want to answer it, just jump right in. So think back to the summer before your first child, your oldest child, was transitioning into middle school. What was your biggest fear as a parent, and what was your oldest child's biggest fear transitioning into the middle school?
Start. Well, I can, hands down, and I think almost the entire panel will agree that my child's biggest fear was figuring out lockers and combinations. You could have asked her anything about school, and it was just, am I going to figure out the locker? I will say she had it down pat, thanks to they have an open door day where they come in the summer, and I think she tried about 45 times until she had it down pat. But that was definitely her biggest fear. As a parent, I think it was just the transition itself. You know, being an only child, she didn't have any siblings to talk to and get information from, so she spent a lot of time talking to older friends, asking a lot of questions. We live in Millville, so there's the dynamic of the combining of the 2 towns and being on the smaller ratio. There was that concern of, you know, are they going to find a niche, place to fit in, you know, being on the smaller end. So that was one of my bigger concerns, which ended up not really being a concern at all. She kind of jumped right in, and socials and again, different activities that sort of bring the kids together. So that was great.
I would have to add, I was going to say, I'll add the same. The lockers was definitely a consistent thing from the one that's coming up to the middle school and my oldest son. But as Lene said, easily figured out. The other concern was to not, without knowing how they were going to find their classroom and have enough time to go from class to class, which is very different from what they do now, because they're a little more free to do it on their own, but still under time restraint and, you know, afraid of getting in trouble if they're late. So.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with my oldest and asked her, can you remember back? And she said yes. Merging with the towns was something of her concern at the time, and the rotating schedule, she thought, so she would agree with that. I think for me, my initial concern as a parent was would she be academically challenged enough, which seems in retrospect kind of, it wasn't what remained my concern. What became my concern after she entered was really her self-development and becoming comfortable with who she was as she was going through her middle school years. But I do think initially I was concerned, is she going to be challenged as much as I'd like her to be academically and but I think later and quickly it became more concerned with, okay, is she developing the way she wants to? She has concerns about peers and friends, and fortunately we talk openly with each other, so those concerns came to me. But that really became more of my focus through middle school for my eldest and actually all of my children. But I think as a new parent coming into the middle school, my concerns were different than what they actually became. The academic challenge no longer really became as important.
For my oldest son and his friends, the thing that sticks out to me most about the transition was there was a lot of concern about what side they were going to be on, and what if every one of their friends is on the other side and they're on the side that they didn't want to be on. I don't recall that with my other two children, but for some reason in my son's grade, I remember vividly the anxiety, I think, which was more amongst the parents than actually the kids. But rest assured, regardless of what side and what team you are on, it all shakes out and everything is fine. So I think the anxiety seems to be more on the part of the parents instead of the kids. I will say that between the time that my son came and the time that my daughter came, my daughter had already been to the middle school multiple times just through different things that Mr. Cameron puts on for the fifth graders. So she was much more comfortable coming here than perhaps my son was back, 6 years ago. So the middle school definitely does a lot more now as far as getting the kids very much accustomed to coming here, and there was a big difference between her comfort level and his comfort level.
Casey was concerned about the lockers, but he came during that day and worked it out.
Okay. The second question, were you clear in the transition of your oldest child of the philosophy of a middle school and how that differs from a junior high school? Anyone can start here, we don't have to.
I can say initially no, I was not. I grew up, I went to a junior high, and so the middle school thing was new to me. I felt you did a fairly good job explaining it when we did come to the fifth grade night in May, sort of making it a little clearer to us as to how it differs from a junior high. But up until that point, no, I really just assumed it was the same thing as a junior high school.
Anybody else? In terms of even knowing the differences, if you do a Venn diagram of junior high over here and middle school over here?
I think I probably had a different experience. I went to a middle school one of the first years they had brought, so I really didn't have a junior high experience to compare it to. I think I just took for granted that I understood the differences, and I really don't think I did until I actually had it explained. I was like, oh, now that makes a lot more sense of the structure being different at a middle school versus a junior high, expectations and the focus of what we look at for goals for the kids.
If I were to look upon these questions, we have about 6 more after this, it's probably the only one that I could probably add some context to that may be helpful for all of you. What's interesting to me, and I have a 2-year-old daughter at home, is the research that came out about 20 years ago, that all the development that a child goes through in his or her first 3 years in life is critical. And I think everyone knows that. But what a lot of people fail to recognize is there's another 3 years that exists in the development of a child that is just as substantial and just as important, and is a development between the ages of 11 to 13. Those middle school years, the body and the brain is developing just as much as they are in the first 3 years. And that research that came out is so powerful and made such an impact upon school districts and schools and how they saw what was once a junior high school. That a junior high school was organized by departments. You'd walk into a hallway and all your English teachers would be there. You'd walk into another hallway and all your history teachers were there. And that's how junior high schools, that's the model of a lot of junior high schools. A middle school is different. A middle school is organized primarily by teams. In our middle school, we have 2 teams per grade. We have 2 teams in 6th grade, 2 teams in 7th, 2 teams in 8th. And the students, when they're placed upon a team, they have all their core subjects in the same hallway. So that transition is really from one classroom to maybe 2 doors down for most of their schedule, most of their day. But what's so important is all those teachers who have your children, they come together at minimum 3 times a week to talk about your children and their growth academically, their growth emotionally, their growth socially. Because that's the big picture, that's the whole child development that has to be looked at in the middle school years. Because again, that's what the brain research asks us to do. Because we know the developmental stages and how important it is when a child is, at the age of 1 or 2 or 3. But for those parents or for those people who say, middle school doesn't matter, or grades 6th, 7th, and 8th doesn't matter, then, they're just missing a whole boatload of research that says, these years are just so essential. They're just so, their brains are ready to be shaped, and the decisions that they're making, not only academically, but the decisions that they're making socially, the risks that they are taking, the overnight trips that we offer, those types of risks that are as much risk for all of you as it is for all of them, leads such an impactful pathway in the brain to later in life, and there are opportunities to take risks later in life. So, there's a clear difference and distinction between middle school and high school middle school and junior high school that I'll talk more about in May, but I wanted to make sure it was brought up here because, for any of you that may be looking at other middle schools, that has to be a part of the conversation, is whether or not that school has an opportunity to sit down and talk about your children. And I actually come from, I was a teacher for 10 years at a middle school in a very affluent community. And even though we called ourselves a middle school, the way in which the 7th grade was organized, and I was the 7th grade team leader, was every 7th grader came together for 3 meetings a week. And that was problematic because I was sitting down as a 7th grade English teacher with the other 2 7th grade English teachers, and I only had a third of the students that were discussed at that meeting. So as a team leader, if I would bring up a student who say we are bringing in the parents because we have some concerns, the other 2 English teachers would kind of be off correcting papers when we talk about that student. That doesn't happen here. When the teachers come together to discuss and talk about and bring you in on the conversation of the students here, they all have the students. And that makes the time that they use to really support the children in these 2 towns so much more useful. Even subtle things like that, when you go to another middle school and you ask, okay, are you middle school or junior high? Yes. Do you do teams? Yes. Do all the teachers share the same group of students? And I think that's only a question that, maybe somebody like me would know to ask, but I think the purpose of this night is to also empower you and to educate you, to what questions to ask. The third question is, what was the transition like? What were your early impressions of 6th grade as a parent? Start with you, Sarah. 7th grade, the transition, but that's okay.
Yeah, the transition was good. I have to say, everybody in the school is so incredibly welcoming, from Mr. Cameron, who spent an hour with us when we came to look at the school, which my son did not understand. I'm like, the principal of the school just spent an hour the last week of school with you, and he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then the secretary, and then the whole team, just everybody, even the students were just, the whole culture here is just really, it's, to me, very special. And it's not, coming from another town. This is not everywhere. This is a very special environment here. And, it took him a couple days because we tore him away from his friends. But the first day he came out and he was sad. And then the second day he's like, it's okay now. But it's been an incredible opportunity for him. He's transitioned really well.
I would say the transition was very easy for my kids. Like Tara said, once they get here, if they had some anxiety before they walked through the door on that very first day, I think once they got here, it all completely went away. I know especially in 6th grade when they start, they actually do, there's a lot of team building things that they do. So the first few days is really just about getting to know who's on, who all these kids are in your classes, and it's kind of nice because they meet some new kids, they do make some new friends, and before you know it, it's 2 weeks in, and the first 6th grade social's coming up, and they're praying that you don't volunteer, so. They're telling you not to, yes.
I didn't have too many concerns with my oldest one transitioning. She was a pretty level kid. I didn't expect her to do too difficult. I know one of the things with the 5th grade teachers, a lot of what I would hear is that they were preparing them for 6th grade. And a lot of what they were doing in the classroom was to prepare them for 6th grade. And having gone through it 3 years in a row, I realized 5th grade teachers really didn't need to prepare them for 6th grade. The 6th grade teachers really prepare them for 6th grade here. And that was one thing I realized, that they really do a nice job helping them get organized for having the different classes and moving from classroom to classroom. They color coordinate everything. Like, they really, and to some kids might think they hold their hand too much. To other kids, they really need that. So yeah, I guess after 3 years, I was like, wow, the 5th grade teachers really shouldn't be worrying about this so much. The 6th grade teachers have got it. So they did a nice job transitioning.
And follow up on that and say, I think they do it in a way that the kids don't see it that way.
Yeah.
I think they do help them a lot too, but I think they give the kids the impression that they're getting all this newfound freedom.
Right.
So they're thinking it's amazing, whereas they still have sort of, someone
nice
watching
balance.
over them very closely, being a little forgiving if they're a minute late because maybe they did have trouble with their locker and they couldn't get their notebook, or maybe they forgot something in their locker. Whereas they just kind of think they get bad and tough now that they're in middle school. But it's a good balance, I think, of how the teachers handle it, but the impression that they give the students to sort of build up their confidence.
I have to agree, the same thing. What you said with the 5th grade, I think there's a lot of, oh my gosh, are they learning the right things? Are they going to know what they need to know getting into 6th grade? And felt like 6th grade as a parent and for the kids was a great transition. There was, I don't want to say hand-holding, but they really segued them in very slowly, and there was no anxiety after that first week about getting to the lockers and being able to open it. There was a lot of understanding that they are 6th graders coming into a new environment, transitioning, and I had no concerns. And by the first week, my son, all he kept talking about was how psyched he was to be in the middle school, and that silly little elementary school, and the attitude just quickly changes, and the big shots now that they're in middle school. So.
And I don't know an actual percentage of students, but I'm thinking that it's a very large majority who have at least been in here once prior to coming that first day of school. They offer so many opportunities for them, from like the February STEM club, open door days, different activities, so that first day of 6th grade is not their first time entering this building and feeling overwhelmed. I know that for my daughter, by the time she came in here, she was raring to go. She knew where she was going, she knew what was happening, she knew the expectations. So I think that if you're taking advantage of those opportunities, I think it only benefits your child when the day comes.
What was your biggest, pick any child, what was a big obstacle that maybe one of your children may have faced here at the middle school?
I honestly cannot think of any. I really feel like it was a pretty smooth 3 years overall. I thought about it, and I even asked him, and there was, I really can't think of it.
You gotta make this real for them. It's middle school.
answer that. Because I did have a conversation with each one of my children and said, okay, what was it? And although academically they were all in a little bit different places, the one thing that they did feel was kind of an obstacle for them, consistent, particularly with the girls, was just developmentally, like getting comfortable with who they were and through those years. And then it goes back to what you were saying, that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, their bodies are changing, they're going through so much. And one of the things, one of my kids said, well, I felt like the schoolwork was kind of easy. And I said, well, do you really want to have really hard schoolwork when you're going through all those changes? Like you were dealing, just your whole body changing and who you're, and all of the social, the emotional aspects of middle school. I said, so it kind of balanced itself out. So I guess my son he has special needs, so we had a different set of needs for him coming through the middle school. I have to say that throughout the 3 years, we were met with full support, even when there were some really challenging times. We definitely, whatever team he was on, there was always a teacher that he connected to on that team that could work with us and work with him. So I feel like that was an obstacle he was presented with, but there were many opportunities throughout the middle school years for him to really find out where his strengths were. Some of them he was able to kind of rise to. Some of them were too early for him, but the opportunities were still there for him. He just wasn't really ready to take them and meet them. But that kind of by the end of his 8th grade, he was able to meet one of those opportunities because they continued to offer them to him. They weren't just, oh, you're not ready today, so not ready ever. It was, okay, you might not be ready for the opportunity today, but it'll be there for you in the future. And I think that was something that had a lot of support. Okay, so I think that's probably good to share. I think that they, yeah, there you go.
About a child in their biggest growth at the middle school.
Well, there's a ton of opportunities here. From the minute he came in here, he got involved with the STEM club. So there's clubs every day after school, and if you can't go to a club, there's a homework club there's stuff all the time. So, and then in addition to your regular courses, there's H period courses, so that you can choose an extra course to take. And then my son is musical, so the band. So he was getting all of these opportunities, like all the regular stuff, and then I think he took STEM the first quarter, and then he was in the STEM club after school, and that led to a robotics program. And then he had the opportunity to visit Brown University to go to a 4D lab. And then I guess some people in all the surrounding towns can go to BVT. He got to go do a STEM program there. I felt like within the first month, he was just thrown all these different opportunities, and he's the kind of kid that needs that, so that was awesome for him, you know what I mean? I just felt like right from the get-go, he was presented with a lot of really cool things, So. And when he's doing the virtual classroom thing with virtual middle school right now, which he's loving. So that's during his special, I don't know all the terminology, the H period. Yep. So he comes, and it's with kids from, just in our country, I guess this time, but you could have kids from all around the world. And he's responsible for his work. Like, he had to work over February vacation and everything. And on the snow day, he said, I have to do it because there's still school. But it's been an amazing, again, opportunity for him to take.
My kids have actually all been involved in sports here at the middle school. So in 6th grade, there's a few things that they're able to do. And then in 7th and 8th grade, they've been able to play either middle school sports or JV sports, and it's been a positive experience for them all. Even with the after-school programs, if you don't play a sport, a school sport, you can always do flag football, there's basketball, there's a bunch of different things. So that's definitely one of the areas that my kids have been really involved in and have really loved.
My son's biggest growth, other than his size, it was amazing from the time 6th grade started and ended, and then by the time 8th grade, it really incredible. But the maturity and responsibility, I think, that he got in 6th grade, learning to get organized, stay organized, all the things that they have anxiety about at the beginning of the year, by the end of the year are there, I felt like was his strength and growth. And the STEM program was amazing. That was a huge opportunity that I think really got him personally interested in the sciences and the technology types of things. With the hands-on clubs, it really added to the curriculum of what they were doing. So I would have to say, academically, those were some really big strengths from 6th grade, and it just grew from 6th to 7th to 8th. Wanting to do it and staying interested in it really helped a lot.
And I asked my daughter if she had an opinion on her biggest area of growth since she's been here for I think 5 months now, and her response was that she could really do public speaking now because they make her get up and talk. So I think she probably might be a little more confident about that than I. But that was her response.
You should have brought her.
So I probably should have.
These last two questions, I think some of you have already kind of embedded in some of the answers, but if you want to add, or if you haven't had a chance to answer them, what ways have your child or children been challenged academically here at the middle school?
My son, like Joanne just said, was very much involved in the STEM program, and they were able to go to a bunch of different things outside of the school day, from the robotics competitions that they went to. They placed well enough that they were able to go to the
WPI.
Is that the state competition at WPI? They've been to WPI actually a number of times for different rocket competitions, robotic competitions. Mrs. Grace drives a van and off they go. So he got a lot out of it. It was right up his alley, very hands-on. And then my daughter has been involved, like I said, in a lot of the sports programs, and a lot of in 6th grade she did like every single sport after school program that there was, from flag football to basketball to, I forget what it was in the spring, but she had, all my kids were definitely very involved with it while they were here. There was a lot to do.
There's a lot of opportunities, so even if you can't go after school, there's opportunities during lunch to get involved, and there's just a lot of opportunities for the kids. There's a lot of options.
And with the after-school program too, it's so funny. At 4 o'clock, there's like a traffic jam here to pick up kids. There's so many kids here that are after school, so there's a lot going on.
I was talking to Lene earlier about some of the things, and I think what's really unique about here, I'm assuming it's unique, I don't know, maybe it's other schools, but what I really like here is it's almost like they're set up that they can't fail in some ways. There's the zero, ZAP part, is that what it's called, ZAP, right? I couldn't remember the name of it. Where kids that they forget their assignment are not allowed to get a 0, they can make it up, and academically it challenges them, I think, to not have to make it up, because it's almost like they can't fail. I don't know how else to describe it, but so I think academically there's a lot of challenges that are put in place that, or support, I should say, that help them no matter what kind of student they are. My son was not huge into athletics, but he was very much involved in the clubs. So I do feel like there's something for every kid, whether they're the quiet one or the very outgoing and active one. There's a lot of different opportunities to be involved, and I just think the whole process from 6th grade to 8th grade has been a huge success for my older son.
What I like about the middle school too is, I think, and you and I have talked about this a million times, I think as a parent, this is kind of your first time that you kind of take a step back, and the kids kind of, I don't want to say they run the show, but they definitely, they go on overnight trips without you. They come to, the 6th grade socials, the 7th and 8th grade socials, so they're busy doing their thing, and you are kind of in the background, helping out when you need to, or stepping in if you need to, but they're kind of the ones that, I shouldn't say that they have more control, but they, I don't know, how would you describe it? Yeah, they're more independent.
But there's tons of communication, so you still know what's going on. Because, my son doesn't tell me anything. I was just just at a PTO meeting and I have to go home and ask him a bunch of questions because I got nothing. But there's the intercom announcements so whatever the kids are hear on their announcements is on the website, so you can read it twice a day, and there's emails, and it's just the communication is really awesome.
There's a parent portal, so you can get online and
See
check
the
their
grades.
grades. So there's never a question of what their grade is. You can just go on yourself. You don't have to rely on them to bring their grades to you. I kind of like that.
Well, when I think of challenged academically, I tend to think of a kid as, being challenged to achieve more, but then when you think of kids, there's such a variety of development that goes on. So I have one who I would probably say was a little slower of a bloomer in getting into doing the homework on time, and she's a smart child, but maybe just not as responsible. I hate to use all those terms because I think it's all part of development. But by the end of 8th grade, she was definitely more committed to getting her homework done, not because she necessarily was going to get into trouble, but because she finally saw the importance of doing it for herself and to doing it to get a better grade, because it made her feel better and it showed her self-worth and whatnot. Whereas as 6th grader, she may not have been too interested just because, oh, well, what's the big deal if I don't do my homework? I don't want to be bothered doing my homework. So I think having an understanding that there's such a wide variety of developmental for teens, preteens at this age academically, and that they all don't develop academically at the same rate, but by the time they get done with 8th grade, they've all caught up to each other. Mm-hmm. And they're all kind of in the same place by then. Am I on a little bit? Okay.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, so not to worry so much at the beginning of 6th grade if you're finding, well, they're not getting their homework done on time, that they're not doing everything. It's not necessarily that they can't do it or they're choosing not to do it. They just haven't quite gotten there where it's important enough for them to do it. Mm-hmm. But by the end of middle school, I felt like I saw all 3 of mine really at that same place, ready to do it for themselves, not so much because they were being told to. A little bit more. I'm trying to think of the right word. Intrinsic. I can't think of that word.
Intrinsic?
Yes. Anyway, thanks.
What questions might you have of us?
I mentioned the PTO.
This is a good recruiting opportunity.
So at the PTO, we like to do more social things, not necessarily fundraising things. So there's always something going on. How's that? There's an auction coming up, March 18th. It was fun, isn't it?
It was fun.
March 18th.
You know, I don't think what else was mentioned either is, I know mine really enjoyed the poetry that comes through the middle school and how they, I think there's a little bit of everything at the middle school level that they can put their feet in, try it out, see if it's something that works for them. And if it does, great, then they're starting to find what interests them. That poetry opened up one of my children as being in the drama club at the high school for a couple of years and really reaching herself out. But I know it started in the middle school, just being exposed to that. So all of these little things that they get exposed to here really start to build on who they become in a couple of years.
I think that that exposure is embedded in the definition of what a middle school should be all about as well. You know, if you walk into your child's room and you see the ice skates, and the ice hockey stick and the basketball and the dance shoes and you're like, how much did this all cost me? As a parent, sometimes we can get caught up in, okay, we're going to commit to this and we're going to do this. But they are still at an age, being 5th graders and through middle school, where the best thing that you can do as a parent is to offer up that exposure and to see really where they might thrive, because it may be in an area that you never thought that they will thrive and they will do well in. I think one of the things that we really try to do here, as I sit down, what's so remarkable about an educator is I know their children better than I know them. And that's pretty cool. If I bump into parents or some of you in a mall, I might recognize you, but, in a year or two, if your child is with you, that's where the connection is going to be made. And that's what's so cool. When I sit down here, I actually see their children. And what I will say is there's a lot of extroverts here. And I think you've heard that energy, how much they jumped into the middle school and they really took advantage of all that we have to offer. But I also think of the students, and it might be your child, who is the introvert. Joanne mentioned this, that may not have come to the 5th grade STEM camp, may not be coming to the August things that we have available, the different socials, the different things. Because in their mind, maybe they're not ready yet. Maybe they don't want to step into this building until maybe the first day. And as a parent, you have to strike a balance, and there are some times you do have to, and I encourage you to push your child out of that nest. Our overnight opportunities is one of them. I put forth a lot of research that says how important that risk is for a child. But if you had a conversation with him or her about the STEM clinic, and they were like, the middle school, what are you talking about? That seems so far away. Developmentally, it is for them. To all of you, unfortunately, it's a blink of the eye. But to them, if they're not ready, that's fine. But I think one of the things that we try to do is really think about the introverts. I just posted something on the middle school Facebook page 2 days ago about what parents and educators can do for the students who are introverted. And the locker was a common theme of anxiety for a lot of the 5th graders coming in. And again, if they just want to come in and out during our open door day in August because it's just too much for them, it's too overwhelming, then one of the many emails that you'll get from me in August will be the building hours, and sharing with you, get your child in at any time you want. And if it's an empty hallway because your child isn't freaking out, maybe you're not freaking out, that might be easier for your learning style or for his or for hers. Same thing with the clubs. We heard of the STEM club and the cooking club and the art club where there's a waiting list, and all these students bring this energy to this club. And Sue Chase and I have had this conversation before, back when the PTO funded clubs. I will not say no to a teacher in this building who wants to advise a club just for 2 students. Because those 2 students, that might be the connection. That might be the area of interest that, again, they thrive in. And what our after-school program also does is build the relationships between our teachers and the students. Because again, and I know this because I've worked in 2 other middle schools, the question about activities and opportunities, yeah, that should be asked, but somebody sitting in the seat of where I'm sitting in, I also know to ask who's running those activities. Because in the affluent community that I came from, the town rec department was leading those activities. So those opportunities were there, those activities were there, but the relationships weren't forming between the teachers and the students. That makes such an impact in the classrooms, because that's a big part of the research too. Students will want to succeed in this building simply because they like this building. It really comes down to such a fundamental level. A student will sit in the classroom at this age and want to do well in that class because they like that teacher and they feel they are liked by that teacher. And in a classroom of, we're only about 18 or 20 average class size, that's possible. But, when that teacher advises a club and that relationship is formed, almost a coaching relationship, like a sport, then the relationship is that much more impactful for the children and for the teachers as well. So, I look at the panel, and what I tried really hard to do, and you probably don't believe me, is, form a panel that wasn't just propaganda, wasn't just a love fest about the middle school. I think I have to peruse Facebook and really just find those, those that negative energy that sometimes exists in Facebook, say, oh, maybe I should bring that parent in next time. But, I think the challenges are very real. It still is middle school. I think what we've done here, if I was to put forth my propaganda, is we've really gone against the grain of the stereotype that Hollywood presents as middle school. And that's just so tremendously special. This is, I think for most of our students, they love these 3 years. And that's really, really cool. And, back to, the 3 years is supposed to be the 3 years. Because I forgot who said it, I think it was Tammy. That's one of the things I impart to my 8th grade teachers. Please don't prepare them for high school. They grow up too fast as it is. Academically, if your bar is a little higher in the skill set, but please, in your everyday stream of consciousness conversations with the kids, don't toss high school out at them 100 times. Because I remember my senior year in high school, it was awful. It was the most bittersweet year I ever had in education because I was in a high school that was so programmed, they were programming us to think about college. And it was like, wait a minute, I just want to enjoy my senior year. And I don't think I recognized that till I left high school. But we recognize that now. And as Tammy said, I tell the 5th grade teachers the same thing. Please, academically, sure, we want them to have the skill set to be ready for 6th grade. But please don't talk to them about, the way 6th grade teachers, won't do this or won't do that, because they actually do, the 6th grade teachers especially. So, that was a kind of something that resonated, that's something Tammy said as well. These 3 years aren't just a transition, from elementary to high school. It really is a place where we look at the body of research that says how much their brain is developing, and we want the 3 years to really be a safe place for them. Any other questions?
Mr. Cameron, I just wanted to add one more comment to another positive thing, but I really, it speaks volumes, I think, of this atmosphere in the building, one thing that has always stuck in my mind when my son was here for the 3 years was that whether it was social or any of the outside activities, the trips, there was always multiple teachers involved with the kids. I remember the 7th grade sleep-in night, the lock-in overnight. There was maybe 1 or 2 parent volunteers and the rest were teachers that I'm sure had better things to be doing than spending their night in the building all night with the 7th graders. But the socials, there's always multiple teachers there. The clubs, the teachers are in charge of the clubs. And I think it's really important, like you said, it builds that relationship with the kids and the school. And it mattered a lot to having that, where, you see it at the elementary school, there's a little less of that and trying to get parent volunteers, but middle school, that was the key thing, I think, for a positive environment.
The lock-in that she's talking about.
I was going to say, that was called a sleepover.
It's actually the 7th grade class comes at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, and they stay here till 8 o'clock Saturday morning. They can sleep if they would like, however, there's not a lot of sleeping. There's pretty much activities planned all night long and a big pancake breakfast at 7 o'clock, so they love it.
It's a very unique group of adults that work here. As educators, we bump into other educators at different levels, and when they ask me, oh, you're a teacher, oh, you're a principal, where? As soon as you say middle school, they're like, oh, that's so difficult, or that's so tough. Parents, same thing, and I think they truly believe that, the 6th grade teachers might want to be at the elementary school. The 8th grade teachers might want to be up at the high school, but that's not the case. We truly love this age. And what we tell all of you is, who they become, good luck, who they become, we don't always see that here. We know that you will see it, and they will come back to you. I don't know if you watch Modern Family, but Phil, has this analogy of, around the age of about 12, they round the moon and you lose contact with them. They come back to you. They will. Boys, maybe not until mid-20s, but they do come back. So thank you for coming. If you have any questions of any one of the panelists, I suppose let's just do a quick acknowledgement And they have won a free cookie for each one of your children at lunch. That's all I can offer.